So I guess next we have Henry Urbach.
Thanks, Don, for the invitation and the chance to join this panel. As Don mentioned, I arrived about 6 months ago, so I'm still kind of a new guy in town, and I think still see this place with the eyes of a tourist in some ways. And I noticed a few things that might be relevant for our discussion today. One is that, by comparison, certainly with New York, where I lived for more than 20 years, and I think many other cities, San Francisco has a kind of uniquely hybrid identity insofar as it's both a metropolitan center, very diverse in terms of class, ethnicity, in every way, and yet doesn't quite understand itself in that way. It still sees itself as, at best, a collection of villages, and more often a single village, in which everyone is somehow united in something ineffable about this place, which often is its cuteness, it seems. and that cuteness, I think, which gets expressed in so many ways, really, tends to fight against what might be the more lively and dynamic and evolving energies of a metropolitan center, where actually the play of differences might be allowed to unfold more directly, maybe even more violently, and more openly, and less in a way that seems to suppose that everyone will just get along somehow and negotiate their way through four-way stops without traffic lights. Secondly, and related to that is something that I've observed, and again, these are my kind of my perspective, so these aren't meant to be truths, but there is, again, by comparison with New York, a very special cultivation of private space here. People pay a lot of attention to their homes and their gardens and dinner parties and quiet evenings and so on. And yet public space is relatively underdeveloped. Again, by comparison with some other cities, by comparison with a lot of other American cities, public space does have a certain kind of life here. But again, I think San Francisco is sort of a unique hybrid in that sense. People can think of it as a kind of European city almost, and yet it's also very much an American city where we spend a lot of time in cars and trying to park and in other structures that really individualize us in public space. And the third is that, and again, by comparison with New York, I think the gay community here has a somehow closer relationship to the tragedy of AIDS, and that the kind of lost generation of AIDS really, one feels an atmosphere of mourning here more than I've ever felt in another city. And so those are actually kind of my preliminary comments to trying to work through a question in my mind, which is, why is it that I so hate the flag that flies on Castro Market? And it's actually, I live with Stephen, who's right there, just up the hill from the Castro, and I almost never go there. There are a few things I like. I like a different light, and you know, the bars can be fun at times, but mostly I don't feel drawn to that, which is really troubling for me because I would love to be drawn to a gay center and to feel a real sense of pride and excitement and curiosity about it. And yet, and please don't take offense, this isn't, you know, again, these are through the eyes of someone who's just arrived, but mostly I feel a kind of boredom. And so, and why is that? And I think for me, that flag really symbolizes an attitude towards space that I think is a kind of a reactionary and maybe even destructive one. And to pick up on something that you mentioned a moment ago, Joyce, about Jews in their homeland, you know, with all respect, I would say that a lot of people ask why Jews need a homeland, and it's not necessarily, and including a lot of progressive Jews. And the question we might ask is, has the Jewish people fulfilled its destiny in creating its homeland, or has the Jewish people set itself back greatly by establishing a homeland in the way that it has? And, you know, this is obviously a huge question with all sorts of ramifications for global politics, but I think it comes right back to our little intersection of Castro and Market, because with that flag, we mark an attitude towards space which is one of appropriation and conquest. This is ours. We've planted the flag. And of course, immediately we get into all kinds of questions about, well, who are we? What is the our that we're marking with this flag? What sort of, let's say, emotional or spiritual affinities do we feel with that rainbow? How is that a symbol that actually captures something for us in this community that is made up of so many different kinds of people who also affiliate in so many other kinds of ways through class and ethnicity and geography and all of that. And so, you know, well, I don't really see myself as offering answers here, but rather trying to raise some questions. So, you know, what are the forms of identity that are now relevant for us, and what are the forms of spatialization that would make sense for us? There was this moment that certainly in hindsight seems like the glory days when we gentrified. We went into poor neighborhoods and we claimed them and we made them nice, and in fact we made them so nice that other people have come in and kicked us out. But you know, it's a kind of ongoing series of appropriations. Tourism is another, and you know, when people come to a strange place and try to capture something of it with their guidebooks and cameras and so on, and perhaps with the yellow brick road that will be provided for them. That's also a kind of appropriation. I myself have been sort of moved by the writings of Michel de Certeau, who wrote an essay on walking in the city, where basically the assumption is that the city presents itself to us, and that we, with our own individual needs, which change in time and so on, maybe can't even be verbalized, go about remaking it in our own way. We take shortcuts. We associate things in our mind. We create things. And so it would be more a process of what Deleuze would call deterritorializing and reterritorializing constantly in a kind of creative and risk-taking way that I would really advocate. Well, having said that, I don't have answers. I will take that position. And so I think for me, the future of the Castro begins when we burn the flag. And when we find meaningful ways to deal with the realities that we face now, which include, you know, a number of things. Rebuilding our culture, not after AIDS, but let's say in the second phase of AIDS. Secondly, understanding new forms of spatiality, such as the internet and what its effects are on our lives. People used to go onto the streets or here into the alleys to look for sex. Now people go online. That's very individualizing. What does that mean? And finally, what are cities becoming? Because in the 60s and 70s, the middle class fled urban centers, and it provided a kind of space for other populations to move into. But now that we've done such a good job with them, the middle class and the upper class, and in fact the super rich, are moving back in. So does that send us out into a new kind of diaspora, out into you know, into the desert? And will that be a productive thing for us, or what?